archives are important because we are a relatively new community in Canada or a relatively small minority. We don't have 3,000 years of history in Canada, but nobody does. But Muslim presence in Canada does date back almost to 1867, the British North America Act in 1871 or something like that. There's a record of Muslims being present. Then they remain small. The first Muslims coming from Lebanon and places like that. Then others came from India and Pakistan. But we do not fully have a good recorded history. I mean, historians have written about it, but we don't have things, documents, pieces of history. And that is why this is an extraordinarily important project. And I'm glad that the Institute of Islamic Studies has started this in a systematic way, because that is a way we tell our story. We tell the story of Muslims in Canada, just like Ukrainians and Polish people and others have done so. Being a minority, we remain, and our history and our record remains neglected. This is not a conspiracy theory. It's a nature of being a minority in a new place. We are pioneers in that sense, and therefore it is very important to have such an institute and such an archives. Then the question becomes, what can we do as individuals to record it? I mean, we have some histories. We know, for example, the first mosque is in Edmonton, 1938. The first Muslims to Winnipeg, I know, went in early 1900s and so on. But other parts of the country, we don't have such history, such recorded history. So we need to know what we can do. So what can individuals today do, for example? Do we have ancestors of people who came at the turn of the century? Do we have people who were present when the mosque in Edmonton was inaugurated by Sheikh Yusuf in 1938? In Manitoba, are there people in Winnipeg who were present when the first mosque was opened and in Winnipeg? And you duplicate that for every community across the country. So that is of ancestors who were here before. What about the more recent immigrants? We bring our history with us. I brought my history from Hyderabad, India, for example. And I grew up during the Nizam's Hyderabad, which was a kingdom. And then he lost his kingdom in 1948. And what I remember as a child is in every household, or just about every household, there was a library. There were ink pots and paper and pen, and the value of reading and the value of Islamic books or non-Islamic books and so on. And then in the 1950s, when Muslims lost a great deal of their treasure and their wealth, the libraries were the first victims of that. And I remember as a child that books were sold for their leather bindings. Their value was found to be in leather bindings, not in what was in the books. And I carry a scar from that because having grown up like that, and it's all lost. So we do not want such things to happen again. We are blessed in this country that we are able to preserve things and so on. So whatever records you may have that may be of value, and you should consider donating it to the archives. That does not mean that they'll come and take everything away from you. You have a discussion with them. You have a discussion with Moska and say, here is what I have. Is this of any value to you? And she will give you her professional judgment and say, no, this is junk. She will not say it like that, but this is useful. Or that at some future time, you may not want to donate it now, but you can donate it later. What are the things to remember? The things to remember, this is not a junkyard. You don't want to just get rid of your things. Okay, let's give it to the archive. No, this is like giving clothes to the poor. It's a bad example, but that's the same thing. You don't want to just dump everything there. You have to make an effort to assess it yourself. Why is this important to you? Why would it be important to anyone else? What makes something important? What makes something important? You are the first Muslim in Pakatawagan Reserve in northern Manitoba. I say that because my brother Yusuf was the first Muslim there. They had never heard of a Muslim. They did not know what Muslim was. His experience was pioneering and unique. I don't say it because he's my brother, but it makes it interesting, you see. The native people had never heard of a Muslim. They had not heard the word Islam. They had not seen a Muslim. And then he tells the stories of how in such an isolated place, most people ended up drunk. What did Yusuf do? Yusuf sat down and made sure that his memorization of the Quran was good. So he kept reading his Quran. There you go. I mean, that's a story. That's a good story to tell. Similarly, you will have stories like that. You were the first Muslim somewhere, or your community had the first mosque built and so and so. You recall your first Ramadan or first Eid celebration. There's a picture of the family at a picnic that was the Eid picnic. Things of that nature that place you in a context on Canadian soil. That is what makes it interesting. But anyway, you and I don't have to judge it. There's a professional in Moska, and she will guide you as to what makes it interesting and what does not make it interesting. What else do you want to know?
I think my next question, I think what would be interesting for people would be like my own relationship with you and your records as well. Because you didn't end up donating your records to us, but I was still involved in the donation of your records somewhere.
What people also need to know is that MiCA is not going to be possessive of your records. If they think, for example, that your records would be better off with the Ontario Historical Society or equivalent historical societies across the provinces in Canada. In Toronto, there's the Matthew Fisher Rare Library books at the U of T. There is another library, archives at the York University. Similarly, there is no shortage of archives across the country. She may be able to direct you saying, you are better off there, which is what she did with me. She said, your archives may be better off with the National Archives of Canada. And I'm grateful to her for guiding me how to do it, and she put me in touch with them. In the end, I may leave the relevant parts to MiCA, and the rest of them can go to the National Archives. Similarly, in your case, in your city, there's generally an archives. In your province, there's an archives. Your universities have archives. So do not be hesitant to communicate that to MiCA and say, look, I live in PI. This is where I've spent all 40 years. I would like to donate it to PI records or whatever, but she'll guide you to it, in that sense, you ought not to feel that you're obligated to just give it to MiCA, but it helps the process in overall building of Muslim history and a record of that in Canada. And hopefully someday, this is my dream, that Moska and Anwar Iman and the Institute would put up an exhibition, for example, of rare whatever from 1938 or 51, or the first people from the Levant had come to Halifax and PEI at the turn of the 19th and 20th centuries. Things like that. There's value to these things, and we need to start thinking like that.
That was actually my next question, and relate to what do you think the future of MiCA can look like, and what do you think the possibilities can be?
I am hoping that in 5 or 10 years' time, we will have enough records of enough Muslims to be then able to tell a story. And what is a story? Story is, when did they come? Historians, as I said, have written it, but probably we can make a documentary out of it. By taking photographs and videos of the things that people have donated. That's one. Secondly, what were the challenges that they faced? What was the kind of racism that they faced? We know, for example, that the Sikhs in British Columbia faced a lot of racism. South Asians faced a lot of racism. Muslims faced a lot of racism because of not so much that they were Muslim, but because they were Asian or whatever. And then when you get to the modern times, it would help counter the distortions that have been introduced into the public domain because of post 9/11 Islamophobia, the like of which we have not seen in this country. I always say, Islamophobia is just the flip coin of anti-Semitism. And when you do polls and so on, say, who are the people you hate the most? Number one, Muslims. Who is number two, by the way? Jews, So these two Semitic cousins are the recipient of the most hate in this country, as they are in Europe and elsewhere. So we need to record this. We need to not only record it, but we need to counter it. The doctor who serves in a small town in Nova Scotia and has provided healthcare to a whole generation of people, he doesn't look like a terrorist. He doesn't look like a jihadist. He doesn't look like a radical. He doesn't look like a fundamentalist, quote unquote, Muslim. All these labels that have been put on it. People, living, breathing people are proof of all the nonsense that has been propagated about Muslims. So if you can tell that story through your records, tell your story through your pictures, your family, and your great contributions to this country, it is in the interest of Muslims and it's in the interest of all Canadians. Canada is only as strong as its various small components are strong and dignified and confident and assertive of their identity and who they are. This is my personal thing. One of the saddest things that has happened in the post 9/11 era is that it has put Muslims, a lot of Muslims, on the defensive. I'm a Muslim, but I'm not a Khomeini Muslim. Who asked you that, I'm a Muslim, but I'm not a fundamentalist Muslim. Does a Christian feel the need to say I'm a Christian, but not a Jerry Falwell Christian, for example, or all the other crazies, or I'm a Jew, but I'm not a Jewish Defense League Jew. On and on it goes. So this kind of defensiveness that has crept into Muslim psychology and Muslim DNA, which is incredibly bad for our children and the young people, we need to counter it. And this is one way of doing it.